And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Today we're looking at two expansions for Summoner Wars. We have Bellor's Retribution and Saella's Precision. Names which will quickly go out of your mind. So let me tell you exactly what we have here are reinforcements for the armies, for the Mercenaries, the Filth, the Mountain Vargoth, and the Swamp Orcs. Now, just as an FYI, these expansions are not sold together. They're sold separately, but you know, for most of you watching this, you are Summoner War addicts and you're going to buy every expansion that comes out. But these are good ones. Let's take a look. We're going to start with Bellor's Retribution, and this is, I have to be honest, the Swamp Orcs have never been my favorite faction. In fact, probably if you asked me to pick a faction, they would be the last one I would pick. Not because I think they're a bad faction. I think they're very unique in what they do, building the swamp walls, but no, they're just not my style. But anyhow, we have here several cards, and I just want to go through some of the cards that were in this one. This guy can destroy, this common, the Conjurer can destroy vine walls to add to his offense, which is interesting, useful when there's a lot of vine walls, but since vine walls are often a part of your attack and defense, not sure how often you would want to use him. At the same time, the Swamp Beast maybe is a good counter to that, because when he's killed, he becomes a vine wall. Does that make him worth his high cost? I'm not sure. The champions are interesting. Glorp, I just like his name. He can spend a magic point. Glorp has, whenever you have him, you have to spend a magic point every time you play a non-wall event card. Now, a lot of their event cards are wall event cards, so that's not so bad. But it is still a negative, and that's because for 6, you're getting someone who rolls 4 dice and has 6 hit points. He's really powerful. I'm not sure he fits in the Swamp Orc grouping as much. I would take him, but then again, like I said, the Swamp Orcs aren't necessarily my forte. And this guy, he can attack people against walls who are dangerous. Splack can entangle people and put vine walls underneath the opponents. Now let's move to the Mountain Vargoth. I really like these guys. I think they're the most straightforward army in the game. They're just all about attacking, and this helps. When he attacks, he ignores all but 1 wound as long as he is next to an enemy wall. So he kind of takes strength from that wall, which can make him a very powerful, strong, slow common to kill. The Storm Mage can call lightning down upon himself, and then it does 1 wound to him and 2 wounds to someone next to him. Very interesting. He's almost suicidal in that regard, but it's a handy unit to have. I really like their champions. Luca here, anyone within 3 spaces, their ability is canceled, which makes him great against those Swamp Orcs. Yes. And then Bellor, when he's attacked by an adjacent unit, if he's destroyed, or if he's not destroyed, anytime he gets hit, they take 1 damage. Very much like characters like this, because they basically have an aura on them. Very useful in combat. And then Varn, for every friendly unit that he's next to, he gets +1. Basically a leader. Very, again, he fits the theme of the Mountain Vargoth. They work together. They forge forward in battle. Now, there was a couple mercenaries included in this set. The Rogue, who can do a backstab. Basically, if he's the closer he is to enemy lines, the more damage he does. And then you have Kogar here, who is a new champion, who can basically stop the person next to you from moving and give them a wound marker. But now let's look at the mercenaries here. Now, one of the things about the mercenaries is that, interestingly enough, the mercenaries that come with this set, I look at as not necessarily reinforcements for the mercenary army, but I see how I put them in other armies. The mercenary army, with its summoner, was a destroy wall type army, or build around the walls. And these don't, I mean, they can fit in that army, but they don't necessarily fit the theme as much as I see, how can I put these in other armies? The Time Mage, for example, he can move diagonally and through other units. So basically he can warp, use a portal. That's pretty neat. But I really like the Bowgrounder. He's 1 and only does 1 damage, but he's ranged and he can move an extra space. So he's a really cheap, fast unit. I'm really thinking about putting him in my Jungle Elf army, which is my favorite army, and he fits the theme of that army. I like him a lot. And the Sword Grounder is nice. I like him because he's another 1/1, but he has 2 damage, and when you hit him, you need a 4, 5, and 6. He's tough. So he's a cheap, tough unit. I mean, not super tough, but he's cheap enough to throw into several armies. Now, the champions that come with this one, here we have a runner from the Mountain Vargoth who, when he hits somebody, he has knockback, basically. He can throw them back. Wrath is a really neat one. He basically, instead of moving, he can move next to any common enemy unit with one or more wound markers. When you're fighting against him, you got to be careful where you have wounded people, because he can smell blood, and he comes and he can move all the way across the board and get into a position not to attack that common unit, but to go after your summoners. So you have to be careful. I really like him. Neat guy. And then Saella, she looks like she escaped from the elves, and because she has that precise ability that the elves have, where when she hits, she does 2 damage. Period. Very useful, very powerful. And then Dougal. I like Dougal. I don't use him that often, but again, he looks like he escaped from the Deep Dwarfs because he has magic. And now let's look at the nasty, filthy filth. The Anointed. Now, the Anointed has one use, and I'll mention that in just a moment, but the Anointed is a more powerful common. If you remember, the commons here are basically here to be mutated. That's what their point of them is. He heals a wound every turn, so if you don't kill him off, they keep coming. That 2 price, though, to put him out is really kind of painful. I mean, yeah, mutating him is easier to do, but I don't know if I like these guys yet or not, because they're not free like the other commons are. But if you add them in with, well, hang on, let's take a look at the Incanter mutant. He's the weakest mutant of all. But any common unit next to him adds 2 to their attack value, and that's interesting because that makes these guys 3 ranged, which makes them suddenly super powerful. I don't know, though, that I want to build a whole deck around that. Now, one of the things I have to mention with the mutants and all the cards that come in the Filth deck here is I threw all them into an army when I got them because I wanted to try everything out that was new. And they do not necessarily fit together as well as I thought. There's a lot of cool special abilities here, but there's not a lot of power. There's not a lot of tanks. There's not, they don't do a lot of attack. They do cool abilities, but cool abilities by themselves aren't going to win you the battle. So you need to mix them in with your other mutants. As you can see, he's weak. He has a cool ability, but he's weak. The Spell Sucker can stop your opponent's events, but he's 0. The Stoneflesh Mutant is basically a walking wall, but again, he's 0. The Void Mutant, you can move onto or through her, and you can go next to any wall, so basically you can use her as a walking portal. But again, well, she's powerful, but very easy to kill. Now, this guy's powerful, but he's a champion, not a mutation, and wins the award for one of the grossest cards in the game. But I like him because he can roll a die, and that's how far his range is. Very cool. Just try not to think about the theme too much. It's a little disturbing. And here's my favorite card from this deck, and one of my favorite cards in the game, and that's Her. Her has a special ability. I like the name, Her. Here she goes. Oh, I'm sorry. Here Her goes. But anyway, her eyes can hit anyone on the board. It's only 1 die, although if you can find some way to up that somehow, that'd be cool. But only 1 die, but can anyone on the board except for your opponent's summoner. And that's really neat because that means their people can't hide. Someone's in the way, you can't get to them, boom, possibly a damage. It's not super powerful, it's not uber powerful, but if you can get her into a corner and guard her with a couple tough units, you can just start hitting your people all over the board. And it's a really neat ability. I like it. Not super powerful, but fun and cool. And it's like nothing can hide from her eyes. I like it. So there you have it. Kind of an overview of them. Like I said, if you're watching this, you're a Summoner Wars fan already, and you're planning to go buy them. So why? Just turn the video off and go get them.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.